They found his teeth before they found his name. Lake Michigan spat out what was left, a torso bloated, fingers shattered, face peeled like bark. One molar held a gold cap. That gold led to the morgue file of Enzo Morelli, a money runner for the Chicago outfit, gone missing 2 nights before the books closed for the quarter. Frank Nitti stood by the window of a darkened office, watching smoke rise from his cigar. He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. This was a message, he said, not to anyone but the room itself. Behind him, ledgers lay open like confessionals. The ink wasn't dry. The numbers didn't lie. Blood debts marked with perfect penmanship. Enzo skimmed off the wrong margin. And now his absence whispered louder than his life ever did. Nitti exhaled. Cold. Clean. Gone. Controlled. Outside, the rain hit Chicago like it meant to drown the whole city. Inside, silence hummed like a held breath. Frank Nitti wasn't born with a gun in his hand. He was born with silence in his lungs. Immigrant child, son of a barber and a cleaner, raised in the choking smoke of tenements that coughed out men tougher than steel. They called him the Enforcer, but he never raised his voice. By the time he turned 20, he had already learned that the deadliest blade was precision, not passion. A whisper in the right ear could bury 10 men. He counted the numbers the way priests counted sins, deliberately. No flash, no flare, just control. Even as Al Capone roared through rooms with rage and showmanship, Nitti sat in corners, watching everything. He spoke when he needed to. And when he did, men listened like it was gospel. His strength wasn't in muscle, it was in memory. Every scent, every name, every betrayal. It lived in his head, waiting to be collected. The first time Frank pulled a trigger, no one saw it. No glory. No crowd. Just a quiet alley, and a man who begged too long. It wasn't about rage, it was about order. Enzo's older brother had shorted the outfit $5,000, promised to pay it back, then disappeared. Nitti found him behind the Red Line station, stinking of booze and desperation. "Please," the man said. "Just give me another day." Frank said nothing. He looked at his watch. Then he shot him through the eye. One clean entry, no exit. No mess. Just a lesson in mathematics. You subtract the problem. That night the outfit understood, Nitti wasn't just the accountant. He was the balance sheet. Inside the mob, loyalty wasn't just demanded. It was measured, accounted for like debt. Nitti ran the books, but he also ran trust. He didn't tolerate margin errors. You were either inside the page or erased. He once had an underboss arrested just to see if he'd snitch. The man didn't. 3 weeks in the hole. No charges. When he returned, Nitti gave him his cut, twice the normal amount. "You earned it," he said. That underboss stayed loyal for life. To Nitti, numbers were more than profit, they were prophecy. If a man owed too much, he was already dead. He could see it coming. He never waited for blood to confirm what the math already knew. Frank Nitti never laughed, not really. But sometimes, when the books balanced after a particularly brutal month, he would close the ledger and light a cigar with a certain look, like a general who won without firing a shot. The other men feared Capone's rages. But they respected Nitti's quiet, because it meant he was thinking. And when Frank Nitti thought, people disappeared. The mob ran not on violence but on structure. And Nitti was the spine. He could sense when someone was about to turn. He'd catch it in their hesitation, the way their eyes blinked during audit. He didn't need confessions. He had the numbers. And in Chicago, the numbers never lied. Before the suits, before the ledgers, Frank Nitti was a bootblack's son in Brooklyn. He scrubbed shoes on street corners, hands cracked from winter wind, listening to men with cigars talk about debts and territory. His mother scrubbed floors for bankers who wouldn't look her in the eye. Frank learned early. Money wasn't about what you had. It was about what you knew. He read quietly, numbers and names, absorbing power the way others soaked up sunlight. His uncle ran whiskey under bridges during Prohibition, And when Frank was 12, he watched him slit a man's throat for shorting a shipment. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He watched. That was the first lesson. The streets don't care if you're a boy. They only care if you're weak. Chicago called like a loaded dice roll. Frank moved west with nothing but a satchel and a pocketbook of names. He worked docks by day, counting crates like a priest counts beads, and by night he played numbers in backroom bars. He didn't drink. He watched. When he noticed a discrepancy in a rum ledger at age 17, he corrected it before the boss noticed, and added a line to balance the skim. The boss called it luck. Frank called it accounting. That same year, 2 union men turned up dead. Frank had signed their overtime slips. His signature was perfect. So was his alibi. The outfit started whispering about the kid who could clean books and corpses with the same precision. By 21, Nitti had traded manual labor for ledgers full-time. He ran the books for a corner crew, dealing in bootlegged scotch. But it wasn't just math, it was power. He knew who shorted, who skimmed, who lied. He didn't threaten, he recited figures. You owe us 436.8, and you've had 7 days. That calm voice sent men running. One crew boss challenged him, called him soft. That boss disappeared. The next day, Nitti balanced his accounts, not a penny off. A note was pinned to the balance sheet. Debtor resolved. Frank didn't fire the shot. He didn't have to. He simply made it make sense. In those years, Frank built a reputation not just as a numbers man, but as a memory machine. He could recall transactions from years ago, cite them verbatim, and identify exact dollar shifts down to the dime. When one smuggler tried to switch crates mid-run, Nitti caught the change by the weight listed on a manifest. 2 pounds lighter, he said. And 2 hours late. That smuggler vanished under the river ice. Frank's memory wasn't just skill, it was weaponry. People feared being remembered by him. Because if Nitti remembered you, it meant your story was already written, and probably ended in red. It wasn't long before Al Capone noticed the quiet one with the ledgers. At a speakeasy on Cicero Avenue, Capone invited Frank to sit, handed him a bill soaked in blood and said, "Tell me what that's worth." Frank looked at it, then at Capone. "Depends who bled for it," he said. Capone laughed. From that night on, Nitti became his shadow, not the gun, not the voice, but the logic behind the empire. He made sure every bottle paid for itself, every man pulled his weight, every lie was tallied. In a world of loud men, Frank Nitti won trust by being the silence they couldn't ignore. Frank Nitti didn't demand respect, he earned it, ledger by ledger, body by body. When Capone ran hot, Nitti stayed cold. One night a warehouse deal went sideways. Guns fired, blood on crates. Capone was furious, screaming threats. Nitti stood in the smoke, untouched. "They were late," he said, voice low. "And they brought 6 instead of 7. That 7th man was a trigger." Capone paused, then nodded. "Get rid of what's left." Nitti already had. By the time Capone's orders came, 3 corpses were being packed in ice. Frank didn't wait for orders. He anticipated them. To Capone, that made him invaluable. To everyone else it made him terrifying. Frank Nitti learned early that loyalty was never loud. It was proven in silence. One of Capone's lieutenants, Donnie Glass Rizzuto, got greedy. Moved shipments without cuts. Capone wanted a message sent. Most expected a beating. Instead, Nitti invited Donnie to dinner. They ate lamb, talked old times. Then Frank walked him to a car and whispered something. Donnie nodded, stepped in, and the car exploded a block later. No screams. No witnesses. Just fire and silence. That night, Frank updated the books. Rizzuto, closed. Capone asked, "You eat with him before you lit the fuse." Nitti said he was family. But math is math. The newspapers focused on Capone's fists, but never saw the brain behind them. Nitti made the outfit run like a machine. Every nightclub, every brothel, every crate of booze was accounted for. He paid off judges with wire-transferred shell accounts, invented fictitious laundromats before money laundering was a phrase. He even structured payroll to provide widow pensions for fallen soldiers. "Keep the wives quiet, keep the crew loyal," he once said. While Capone's temper drew headlines, Nitti's equations built an empire. His real weapon wasn't a gun, it was a pen dipped in red ink. Frank didn't just protect the empire, he watched it from the shadows. One evening, he stood atop a hotel rooftop, watching the city below as the crew partied inside. Men toasted, drank, howled over roulette wins. Frank didn't join. He knew too much. Every laugh reminded him of a payoff. Every drink clinked like a bribe. He never smiled, only calculated. Capone once asked why he never partied. Nitti replied, "Because I already know how it ends." In a world drunk on power, Frank stayed sober. And that's why he survived, while others burned. Capone's downfall came like thunder: tax evasion, indictments, trials. Cameras flashed, reporters screamed. The outfit trembled. But Nitti didn't blink. While Capone sat in courtrooms shouting at judges, Nitti sat in the background, taking notes. Quietly, he began shifting operations, rewriting the hierarchy, moving the empire's accounts offshore before the feds could catch up. When Capone was finally hauled off to Alcatraz, some men panicked. Not Nitti. He simply opened a fresh ledger, labeled it Transition, and started recording. In truth, the outfit had already changed hands, months before Capone ever saw a cell. After Capone was locked away, there was no official ceremony, no crown handed over. But everyone knew who ran things now: Frank Nitti. He didn't take the boss's chair, he left it empty and ruled from the books. Meetings weren't loud anymore. They were silent, tight, efficient. He cut waste, cut double-dippers, cut old loyalties if they didn't produce. "Efficiency is loyalty," he told his capos. Those who resisted found themselves audited by bullets. Nitti turned the empire into a corporation of ghosts and balances. No spotlight, no headlines, just clean numbers and buried bodies. The press started calling him the Enforcer. He didn't correct them. The truth was too quiet to print. Nitti transformed the outfit's reach without firing a shot. He embedded their profits into unions, casinos, shipping. He bought silence in judges' homes and fear in every courtroom. Politicians shook his hand but never remembered when. Cops got paid on time, their pensions padded with laundered funds. He didn't show off like Capone. He let others do the talking, the killing, the panicking. He just kept moving decimal points, watching fortunes build on the backs of whispers. If Capone was the storm, Nitti was the fog that followed. The kind you don't see until you're lost inside it. Even the executioners feared Nitti, because he didn't raise his voice, he raised expectations. When a low-level runner skimmed profits from a numbers racket, he wasn't beaten. He was invited to dinner. Mid-meal, Frank calmly slid a receipt across the table, accurate down to the penny. "This is what you owe, plus interest," he said. The runner nodded, sweating. Frank leaned in. "This debt is already paid." The man looked confused, until he felt the knife. His body was found in a meat truck 2 days later. Clean kill. Clean books. Nitti didn't yell, didn't threaten. He just closed accounts. Despite the fear he commanded, Nitti lived like a ghost. No lavish mansion. No gold chains. Just a modest house, a typewriter, and a vault. His closet had 5 identical suits. "Style is weakness," he once said. He didn't trust chauffeurs. Drove himself. Ate alone. Every morning he shaved with a straight razor and counted his own cash, because trust to him was a liability. No photos on the walls. No children's laughter. Just ledgers, silence, and an old radio playing jazz at low volume. The devil didn't dance. He calculated. But no empire runs clean forever. A senator's aide turned informant. Wiretaps started appearing like weeds. Nittit's name began slipping from sealed files into whispered conversations. The walls closed in slowly, like a vice turning tighter each week. One of his top collectors was caught on tape. Then, another. Nitti said nothing, but at night he added new columns to his ledgers, names, dates, risk factors. The man who built the empire without sound could now hear it cracking beneath him. Not with a bang, but with a rustling, like pages turning in the wrong direction. It started with a ledger that didn't belong. Delivered anonymously. Left on the doorstep of a federal prosecutor in an unmarked envelope. It held names, payoffs, routes, things only someone on the inside could know. At first, the outfit dismissed it as a fake. But Nitti knew better. The handwriting, the formatting, it was their system. Just not his hand. Someone had duplicated the structure, but not the silence. It screamed betrayal. Nitti locked himself in his office, rereading each line like a confession. Whoever wrote this, he muttered, knew exactly what to reveal, and what to keep hidden. That was the tell. This wasn't a whistleblower. It was a scalpel. The betrayal wasn't loud, it echoed in silence. A runner hesitated before shaking Frank's hand. A consigliere arrived 10 minutes late to a meeting, something he'd never done in 20 years. The whispers had a pattern. Names once trusted stopped appearing in the ledgers. And worst of all, new wiretap reports matched internal timetables. Too precise to be coincidence. Nitti didn't rage. He watched. He revised protocols. Moved meetings to different cities. Started writing codes only he understood. He knew the traitor was still close. It's not fear, he told his second-in-command. It's knowing that someone knows me too well. Frank called in every capo, one by one. No shouting. Just eye contact. He asked each man the same question. What don't I know? Most looked confused. One trembled. Another deflected. And then there was Benny Caruso, Frank's cousin by marriage, numbers runner since the Cicero days. Benny smiled too quick, blinked too fast. You think I'd ever cross you? He asked. Nitti didn't answer. He simply nodded and let him leave. That night, Benny disappeared. No body. No blood. Just gone. Nitti didn't need proof. He needed silence restored. And sometimes, silence had to be enforced with absence. But the leaks didn't stop. Another envelope arrived. This one marked with a playing card, King of Spades. Inside were more names, more numbers, this time detailing a murder Nitti had ordered a decade ago. A murder no one else should have known. That was the breaking point. Frank poured himself bourbon for the first time in years. His hand shook. This isn't just betrayal, he whispered. This is vengeance. The realization cut deeper than any bullet. Someone wanted to hurt him, not just expose him. And worse, they knew how. This wasn't a rat. It was a ghost with a grudge. Nitti assembled his last trusted men in a safe house outside Cicero. The room smelled of fear and gasoline. He laid the ledger on the table. This, he said, is war. No yelling, no threats. Just a list of names with red lines. The room was silent. Men looked at each other, unsure who would still be breathing tomorrow. We clean this, Frank said, tapping the book, or we all drown with it. He didn't blink. Didn't flinch. In that moment, even the most brutal killers in the room realized something chilling. Frank Nitti wasn't just going to find the traitor. He was going to erase the entire possibility of betrayal ever existing again. The betrayals bled into the streets. A warehouse in Burnham went up in flames. A lawyer on the outfit's payroll was gunned down at a red light. A safe house in Cicero was raided, no arrests, just missing files. Nitti sat in a motel outside Joliet, chain smoking, his ledger on the bedspread, pages folded back like scripture. He wasn't calculating profits anymore. He was measuring time, what was left, who was left. The empire he built with silence now screamed through sirens and headlines. He circled 3 names. "This ends with them," he said to the empty room. "Or me." The math no longer worked. The numbers were bleeding. He struck first. 2 of the 3 marked names vanished within 48 hours. 1 car bomb on Pulaski Avenue that day. 1 body fished from the Calumet River. Nitti left no fingerprints. Just silence. But the 3rd target, Luca Marinelli, disappeared. A ghost. A shadow. He was the leak. Frank knew it. The kid he raised in the outfit's back offices, taught to balance books and bury bodies. Now he was somewhere out there feeding the feds detail by detail. Nitti stared at a childhood photo of Luca and whispered, "I taught you too well." The devil didn't see the traitor coming because he created him. The walls weren't just closing in, they were wired. Nittit's safe deposit boxes were frozen. 1 bank account flagged. His trusted courier flipped and vanished into witness protection. Then the real blow came, a subpoena with his name on it. No aliases. No fronts. Just Frank Nitti, cold on the page. He walked out of the federal building's rear exit, trench coat soaked in rain, reporters screaming his name behind barricades. He didn't turn. Didn't flinch. But his hands were shaking. That night, he opened his oldest ledger. Page 1. Capone. Before Capone. Before the outfit. He read it like a diary. Every name, every number. And he knew it was almost over. Frank spent his last night in the attic of an old apartment above a closed tailor shop. The air was dusty. The world was quiet. He opened one final book, a fresh ledger. No ink, no names, just blank lines. He poured a glass of whiskey, lit a single lamp, and placed a revolver on the table beside him. He stared at the blank page for hours. Not because he had nothing to write, but because everything he'd ever written led to this. Silence didn't save him. Numbers couldn't protect him. The man who calculated empires had nothing left but entries that no longer mattered. Just one final audit date. One final line. At dawn, a gunshot echoed across the rooftop skyline of West Chicago. Locals thought it was a car backfiring. Cops found Frank Nitti slumped in his chair, blood on the final page, empty, untouched. The ledger closed forever. No note. No message. Just silence. The press wrote headlines about a mob boss who cracked. But those who really knew better. Frank Nitti didn't die in fear. He died with balance. He knew the math was done. The debts paid. The silence upheld. In the end, there was no trial, no confession. Just a quiet book and the man who made sure every name inside it was accounted for, even his own. Frank Nitti was buried with no family at the grave. Just 5 men in black coats, none saying a word. No priest. No music. Just the cold thud of earth on wood. The newspapers called it the quietest mob funeral Chicago had ever seen. But silence was exactly how Nitti would have wanted it. The outfit didn't mourn, they reorganized. Within hours his ledgers were burned, his contacts erased, his codes buried deeper. The man who built the machine made sure it could run without him. But there was one thing he couldn't delete, the fear. His name was no longer spoken, but felt, like a shiver down the spine when money moved without explanation. In the months that followed, the outfit fractured. Some went west. Some went into real estate. Others disappeared entirely. But one thing remained. The structure. Nittit's methods had changed the underworld. His double books, silent laundering, ghost corporations, all became standard practice. Even rival families copied his model. He was the mob's ghost accountant, dead, but still managing risk. A senator once asked, "How come no one ever talks about Nitti?" The reply came from an ex-capo. Because if we talk about him, we owe him something. That was Nitti's legacy. Not blood. Not glory. Just debt. Luca Marinelli, the traitor, lived. Under a new name, in a new state, behind new eyes. But he never slept well. He changed phones weekly. Checked locks 4 times a night. He knew Nitti was gone. But he also knew what Nitti had written. Somewhere, out there, the original ledgers still existed. Maybe in a safe. Maybe with a lawyer. Maybe buried beneath a foundation in Cicero. Luca had seen them. Knew their weight. And every time he heard a door creak or a footstep behind him, he asked himself the same question. What if Frank planned this too? Years later, a rookie agent found an unlabeled box in a federal evidence vault. Inside, ledgers written in code, sealed with wax, dated from the 1930s. Most couldn't be deciphered. But one page stood out, a single phrase in perfect English. Silence is the last loyalty. The agent brought it to his supervisor. The older man looked once, then closed the box. Forget you saw that, he said. And the box went back into darkness. Because even decades after his death, Frank Nitti's words could still make men obey. His voice was gone. But the silence still gave orders. There's no statue of Frank Nitti. No biography that tells it straight. But walk into any backroom where money's moved in silence. He's there. In the codes. In the cut. In the fear that makes men look over their shoulders. He didn't rule with fire. He ruled with formulas. He didn't leave behind bodies. He left behind systems. And when someone asks, whatever happened to the enforcer, they're told, he balanced his books. That's the cost of silence. It doesn't scream. It echoes. And if you listen closely, in the quiet corners of power, you'll still hear it, the soft scratch of a pen, recording every sin, one last time.